Good day. And I want to thank for a moment here, David Lorsch, who's joined us from Scottsdale, Arizona, I believe. David, is that correct?
That is correct.
A beautiful sunny Scottsdale and a beautiful sunny day this spring. And you are an extraordinary representation of the kind of ingenuity and hard work that has made not only this country, but also has made this market so extraordinary, which is the sense of entrepreneurship that you've brought to pretty much everything you've done since the age of 15, it sounds like, and it may even go beyond that. And in talking to a lot of our entrepreneurs, I'm always amazed by their origin story. And I was really hoping you could lead us off by telling us a bit about, how you started. You entered the consumer electronics industry at the age of 15. How did you end up in the industry? When did you realize you had a passion for it? Talk to us a little bit about that.
I grew up in south suburb of Chicago called Homewood, and there was a chain of stereo stores called Music Craft, and their main warehouse was in Homewood. And I don't know, the age of 13, 14, I liked hanging out at the stereo store, pushing buttons. Any button I saw, I pushed. And I got to know the owner of the company's daughter, and her husband was the manager of that warehouse and also the head buyer. And I knew a couple of guys that worked there, and they were they were high school guys, and they were going to college. So I had an inside track to get a job. So I schmoozed my way into a job at 15 years old, working in the warehouse, chucking boxes Monday and Thursday nights. Back in those days, they stayed open late. And my job was to put turntables together. That's when you bought a turntable and it came, you could either buy a plastic base or a wood base, and you could buy a dust cover or one that was hinged. And then you had to get a separate phono cartridge, and I'd have to sit in the back and mount the phono cartridges and then try and load some jumbo stereo into a guy's 1976 Ford Pinto. So I really started working in a warehouse, and it was just something I loved. So it was really not like going to work. It was an easy job, so to speak.
We could have a whole other conversation for those who are younger than I am, who wouldn't know what a turntable is or even pushing buttons on a stereo. But it's extraordinary that you were able to get into that and really link that passion for stereos with a first job. What was your favorite kind of music back then?
Oh, all rock, no disco. Just what today is considered classic rock. In those days, it was just rock. You didn't have streaming. You didn't have the advent of the 8-track and the cassette. I heard somebody a long time ago from Logitech give a talk about the history of the formats. And with the LP, you could get 45 minutes of music onto an album, which my son in these days, they refer to them as vinyls. And then they came with the 8-track and the cassette, and you had to give up sound quality for portability. The cassette worked better than 8-track eventually, but you used to carry, a little suitcase with 30, 40 cassette tapes in your car. And that's how you listen to 40 hours or 50 hours worth of music. And then as the compact disc came, the quality of sound increased again. And then streaming came, the quality went back down when it went to MP3. And now they've brought the fidelity back in streaming. And nobody knows what it is to go buy an album anymore.
Although it's coming back. It's coming back, ironically. All things old come back and new again.
I take a little credit for bringing the turntable back 15 years ago.
Talk to us a little bit about that. What did you do?
I had a manufacturer called Audio-Technica, and they still made phono cartridges. They're a big microphone manufacturer, headphone manufacturer, and they had phono cartridges. And I would sell, when I had my distributing company, every time we got phono cartridges, we'd sell them out. And every time I got a turntable in, we sold out. Nobody was making enough of them. And so I said, would you guys make make a turntable. I could sell a heck out of it. And vice president of sales walked in my office one day with a vintage copy of the Moody Blues Days of Future Past, and to introduce that they were bringing out a turntable. And then he, by a stroke of luck, found a piece of software called Cakewalk, which would allow you to dub from your turntable to your PC. And we threw this $4 piece of software into the turntable, and they went nuts. Then they brought a lower priced one down. We were selling 15,000 units at Christmas time to Costco.com. And there was no business for 15,000 turntables, but there was business. Plus, every person that is 60, 70 had a couple of thousand record. If you were a music aficionado, you had a couple thousand record albums, and your turntable got old, and nobody had anything to replace it. And if anything, they were buying it to archive the music. They didn't want to go buy 3,000 albums; they already had paid for them. So that's kind of how we revived it. It was really by accident, but it was a lot of fun.
So let's take this line of thought for a minute. So talking a bit about, as an entrepreneur, especially in the consumer electronics industry, things are changing so constantly. How did you, in the evolution of your company, stay ahead of that change and have a good sense for what the consumer wanted? What are the things that drove that?
Well, my mentor, my first boss out of college, had a saying. I'm not coming up with the right term, but whatever we're making money on today, we will not make money on tomorrow. Or in the genre of the movie All the President's Men, about Watergate, follow the money. So in consumer electronics, it's no different. You have to follow the trend. It does not change as quickly inside the industry as it does outside. It changes very quickly for me now because I've been retired for 14 years. Although I follow it closely, I'm not on it every day. So it's moving faster in my own life. But as things got popular, as things started to happen, you got to follow it. You buy, if we're talking to younger people, I don't know if they know what a gross is. Things came in dozens. I think today now everything's packed in tens, but you bought a gross, which was 12 dozen. And if you sold that, you bought 288. If you sold that, you bought 276. And you followed the money. And you had to be careful because sometimes the demand could fool you. But there was a product called the VCR Plus. The VCR Plus, they had come up with this algorithm that became printed in the TV guide. And if you put this number from the TV guide, it would tell your VCR what time to start recording, what channel to go to, and what time to stop. And there was a separate device called a VCR Plus, which was a universal remote control with an algorithm in it. You laid it on the table, it sent a start signal, it changed the channel and turned the VCR on. It changed the channel, start recording, and at whatever time it would press stop. And the thing went crazy. And so you're always backpedaling when something gets hot, and you're always trying to recover. Digital picture frames, North American Philips with the Magnavox brand. I don't know if it was Magnavox. No, it was Philips brand. They almost put me out of business one year because the demand was crazy. They didn't have any product. It was Christmas time. I had back orders for 15,000 units, and I was a wholesale distributor. I have to get it to the dealer. They shipped me 15,000 units straight from China, arrived on the 20th of December. And then they go to the electronics show 2 weeks later in Las Vegas and lower the price $20 on the new model. So you were always fighting that battle. Same with flash memory. The flash memory was one of those very crazy, volatile prices. But again, you followed it. At one time, VHS videotape was one of my best selling products. And then it was 8mm videotape. Then it was mini digital videotape. Right now, it's no videotape. It's memory cards. And I used to sell a 1 gigabyte memory card for $99. Today you can't even buy a 1 gigabyte memory card. A 16 or 32 is probably as small as you can get, and they're probably under $10. So it was always. I have a lot of we call them Lorschisms. I have a lot of little sayings, and consumer electronics is not like fine wine. It does not get better with age. Or if you're talking about Wall Street, it's a little different. But in the consumer electronics business, your first loss was your best loss, because everything was bigger, better, and cheaper the next day. So you always had to stay on it. We had software that was, in theory, supposed to have algorithms to tell you how many units to buy. And I would never allow my system to buy on an automated basis, because the demand can fool you. Somebody comes and buys 400 units, but there's really demand for 100. So you got to look at who bought it and what's going on. But again, to bring this thing back, you're in it every day. You're watching it. You're watching the technologies move. As they catch on, they move quickly. And if you move quickly, you can capitalize on the opportunities. No different than today.
Completely. So let's go back to when you founded DVL Distributing. Sort of what led you to go out on your own, number one. And then what were your founding principles? What were your guiding principles? And did they evolve over time?
Well, I started DVL because I didn't have a job. Short version of a long story, at 24, I was sales manager of a company doing about $50 million in business. At 26, I was burned out and quit. Decided to go around the world, didn't make it around the world. Came back, did a couple of jobs as a national sales manager. I went to Club Med, met a girl from Montreal. I was living in LA, and we dated for 9 months. We broke up for 5 months, and then I flew to Montreal and asked her to marry me. And I was about 3 weeks from being out of a job. And I started a job on Monday. She came out to Los Angeles after we got engaged. And I started a job on Monday morning, and I quit on Friday. I wasn't going to make money fast enough. And so I said, I want to start my own business. He's like, okay. My father was an entrepreneur. Her father was an entrepreneur. I wrote 6 different business ideas in a 1-page synopsis, which I found recently. I found the documents recently.
That's very cool.
Yeah, they were lost for a lot of years. And you didn't have a scanner to go put it on to scan it on your PC. And DBL was one of the 6. At the end of the day, the barrier to entry was fairly low. I decided to locate in Arizona so that I was going to be a bigger customer quicker, because it was a much smaller market than Los Angeles was. So we came to Arizona, and then we specialized in accessories, cables, batteries. In those days it was cassette cases and camcorder bags, camcorder batteries. And even today, I just bought a new laptop from Dell and went to look for another AC adapter. People still don't know how to sell accessories. It's talking 32 years later, and they still don't understand. Dell, this huge company, does not understand how to sell the customer a $60 AC adapter and make $20 or $30 on it. They'd rather sell the computer and make $100 on it and do, X billions of dollars in volume. But it was the same back then. So there was a hole, and these stories, I'm sorry if I get a little wordy. There was a hole in the market for accessories. And so I created a catalog, mailed it out, and said, well, if you want to buy something, call me. And I found out the hole was bigger than we thought it was. Because the hardware people didn't really like selling accessories. That was an afterthought. And I made it a primary business. So when you talk about founding principles, my philosophy was, if I can teach you how to sell accessories, I can make you as much money and double your gross profit dollars with the sale of a few accessories as you could on the hardware. So I think in my first catalog, there was a letter to my customer talking about, you sell a camcorder for $799 and it costs you $650. So you make $150. Now, if you sell somebody a camera bag that costs you $30, you could sell it for $59.99. You sell a battery that costs $25, you could sell it for $49.99. You sell a tripod, costs you $30, you can sell it for $60. And at the end of the day, with the add-on sale of a few accessories, I could bring you as much profit. And if you're an independent, even going back, and the independents were my primary customer. That's who I was aiming at. And I didn't want to penalize the independent. I didn't want to make him pay more because he was only buying one. So I went out with the philosophy of same price for one or 100. And but I had to keep these guys in business because that was what my business plan was on. So I got to make them some money. And I was also more aggressive on pricing because the hardware guys wanted to make too much money at wholesale. So I came out, this little guy, and showed up, and I was beating everybody on price and making people money. And they liked me, so to speak. I think that's a Sally Field line from the Oscars.
That's exactly right. That's amazing. You were popular in one side of the business and probably not as popular in the other side of the business.
I had, well, yeah, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Exactly. So, I read that you believe in 4 key things when doing business: have a fair price, a good product, give great service, and when you have a problem, solve the problem. Could you share with our listeners one of the biggest problems you had to solve when you were running your company?
There were, you could do them in alphabetical order, depending on the size we were. We made a catalog. So if you're on the internet and you put a price that's wrong, you can fix it in 10 minutes. Well, you print a catalog and it stays out there for 6 months or 3 months. And you have to tell this customer, gee, sir, I'm really sorry, I can't sell it to you at that price. One time we had a Koss headphone. It was supposed to be $26.90. They printed $20.90 because they couldn't read my handwriting. Now, I got lucky. It wasn't a very popular unit, and we just gave everybody the $20.90 price, and I lost a few dollars. We made a flyer, a sale flyer for the brand Sennheiser. Back in those days, I was the largest consumer distributor for Sennheiser in the United States. So when they're making this flyer, we had 4 sets of wireless headphones, and when they're laying out the page, they duplicate the copy, and it's supposed to be what they call FPO, for position only. And then they're supposed to go in and update the copy, update the illustration, update the pricing. Well, they printed the whole page. All 4 headphones were $39.99. One was supposed to be $149.99. And now the error was big enough and visible enough that the average person saw that it was a mistake. But when one woman calls up one day and wanted to buy 2 sets of the wireless headphones, and we were wholesale, but she was actually buying them for Christmas presents, one for her and one for her husband. And my guy said, man, we can't sell it to you at that price. and the call got to me. Well, it got to my secretary, and then it got to me. And I said, ma'am, do you notice all the prices on the page are the same? Doesn't that kind of look like I made a mistake? And I pulled up on my computer. I said, look, my cost on this $149 headphone is $128. I really can't sell it to you for $39.99. I said, how about if I lose a little bit of money, I'll sell them to you for $100. Would that make you happy? And she said, thank you. And we were at the electronics show, and I was getting an award from Monster Cable for Distributor of the Year. And she was in the audience. And after I got the award, she comes up to me and she says, you remember the woman with the Sennheiser headphones? I said, yes. She said, well, that's me. And I just want to say thank you because you did the right thing. The simple piece of that philosophy, and probably the company that exemplifies it best is Amazon. I have great awe for what Amazon does. I saw today they're opening a distribution center in Phoenix that can ship 300,000 packages a day. At my peak, we shipped 1.5 million packages a year. And we kind of puts it in perspective. But if you give somebody a good price, I didn't say the cheapest price. You give them a fair price. You give them good merchandise. You give them good service. This is before the days of everything coming overnight, but I shipped my orders the same day I got them. And I killed myself. I got the order and ran into the back and shipped it. So I was beating people on the East Coast, even though I was shipping from the West, because I shipped it faster. They took 2 or 3 days to ship it. So I gave them good service. And if you called me up and you had a problem, fix it. Don't fight with the customer. I mean, once in a while, you got to have a fight with the customer, but fix the problem. And if you do those things, you don't lose. I always said that if my price was $1 and my competitor's price was $1, who would the customer buy from? The company they like better. If my price was $1 and my competitor was 98 cents, and the customer said to me, David, I love you, but I don't want to pay you more money. And as long as I still had profit in it, okay, I'll give you the 98 cents. And then the customer, if I was 98 cents and my competitor was $1, the price buyer would come buy from me. So tell me how I ever lose a customer. I mean, it's a very simplified version, but you know that's how Amazon has built its company. You go on there, you get a fair price. They're not cheapest. You get it awful fast. You call them, you got a problem. They credit you, or they send you another one, and they take care of the problem. What more can you ask?
No, so very true. So let's pivot a second to the sort of pinnacle goal of many entrepreneurs, but also oftentimes the most psychologically devastating goal of a lot of entrepreneurs, which is the decision to sell a business, especially one that one has invested so much of one's life in. What led you to choose to think about selling the business in 2007, and talk us through that experience?
Well, in 2004, a couple of events went on concurrently. A cousin of mine, not on my cousin Vinny's scenario, he's actually an investment banker in mid-market distribution, called me up and said, can I value your business for you? So he came in, we gave him numbers, and he came with 4 different valuations: private company selling private, private company to public, public company to private, and public to public, how it could possibly be valued. And then one day, the company that bought me eventually was Ingram Micro. And I get a phone call on a Friday afternoon from the acting North American president. And he says, he leaves me a voicemail. Here's my cell phone number. You can give me a call on the weekend if you'd like. And I know the president of Ingram Micro is not calling me to ask me how my steak dinner was last night. And I would always, every entrepreneur should always be willing to sell their company because you don't do this for your health. Creates high blood pressure, heart attacks. I had all those things after I sold the company. So you sit down and you realize that the people you're dealing with are more sophisticated. If you're an independent, they're most likely more sophisticated than you are. And they've got discounted cash flows and the weighted average cost of capital. And they're trying to see what is incremental to their business versus what are they just doing to take you out. Does 1 and 1 equal more than 2? And they came in with a number, and I went, thanks very much. I'll go to work Monday morning. And I always kept the door open. I would see the president of Ingram Micro. We went to the Grammys together with one of our factories, and wound up there having a little interview that I didn't know I was having, so to speak. And but at the end of the day, I had a number in my head. And through most of my time that I owned DBL, my number was always about twice what it was worth. Back in the early days, if it was worth $1 million, I would sell it for 2. When it was worth $2 million, I would sell it for 4. And I had a number that I wanted to get to. And I stayed on it. And it's not easy. We went through a lot of hell to get there. And so hang on. Let me grab my thought here. One, as my company got larger, and again, depending on who's listening to this podcast, people will see it in varying degrees. We were approaching 300 million in sales, and we weren't a little company anymore. We had over 400 full-time employees. At Christmas, we would be up to 600. Nobody could really count. We'd have 5 temp agencies on the floor, and anybody that could fog a mirror, we were giving them a pick ticket to go get an order. And it wasn't as much fun anymore. I used to know everybody. I used to know their family. I used to know their mother. I used to, we had employees that met working for me, that got married, that got divorced. We had babies. We were a city. We were more like a village. And as it got bigger, I didn't know everybody. And people would come up to me and say, hello, Mr. Lorsch. And I would always say, no, Mr. Lorsch was my grandfather. I'm David. And after a while, as we got so big, I stopped doing that just because I didn't have time to go through it. And so we were a little bit burned out. Also, as the company gets larger, it is very hard to maintain private ownership. We had a buy-sell agreement. My senior management team had a buy-sell agreement. If I were to get sick and die, there was life insurance to pay my wife for the business, and they get the business, and the grieving widow who hasn't been running the business doesn't have to run it. And the other thing is your business when you die is valued at the day of your death. Well, it's not worth as much because you've passed, but the government doesn't care. It's worth what it's worth on the day you sell it. And it got to the point where my COO said to me, David, we can't, with the life insurance, the company bought life insurance. The cost of the life insurance was getting to the point I couldn't buy more. And he said, if you die and we have to base my buying it out, I can't afford it. We'll go bankrupt on my contract to buy the business out. So you have to start bringing in outside money at some point because it becomes too hard to manage and too hard to control those black swan type events. So I was ready. I thought I was ready. You got some other questions there? Are you?
Well, no, look, you just almost led me to it. You said I thought I was ready. So when you say I thought I was ready, in hindsight, were you ready? And what was that experience like? Sort of day after the sale, how did you feel?
Well, first off, when you go from zero in sales to 325 million, and you go from no employees to 400 full-time employees, you have an obligation. You feel a sense of obligation to the people that work for you. The second thing is, this was your baby. My name was on the mantle. By the way, a piece of advice: don't name the company after yourself, because if you sell it, your name goes with it. Note to self: remember that, because I sold my initials, and they were very valuable to me. But the other thing is that it is very hard to watch somebody else run your business. And that's the hard piece. If you can monetize 18 years of work and have enough money to live the rest of your life and take care of your families and their families, you should do it. But it is a difficult divorce. After I sold the company, we fought for 2 years over post-close monies. I did not like my old company. I did not like what they were doing. I did not like how they were soiling my reputation. Oh, they really weren't, but it was mine. And I didn't like what happened to my employees. They shut down my warehouse. They opened up a warehouse in Ohio and moved the rest of it into Southern California, and went down to 80 people and laid off all my warehouse guys. And those things are very hard. And you lose your status. You sell your status. When I would go to the electronics show, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, I've gone to every show since 1979. And people know you, and they're my friends, they're my family, I mean, my suppliers, my friends in the industry. And now you're just a common folk, and you're no longer the king. My wife was no longer the queen. And those are things. Now you get over it because you've made money, but those are the pieces that are difficult. And nobody will advise you against selling. And the reason for that is that everybody around you has a vested interest in you selling the company. Your executives are getting paid, the investment bankers getting paid. And that's not to say that they didn't care about you, but they had a payday. And nobody says to you, do you want to talk about what this is going to be like in 6 months? I've always maintained that if anybody's listening to this and you want to call Alliance Bernstein and get my phone number or email address, I'll be glad to take you through a few of these things, because it is a very humbling experience. The deal blew up on us twice. Deals are supposed to blow up 3 times. That's the rule of thumb. First, we had an ERISA issue. And we had another company, and if it wasn't set up properly, I could have a liability for 401k for X millions of dollars. I came to find out that their whole reasoning was wrong, and then we had an issue over sales tax liabilities, even though I was a wholesaler. This will take a whole nother podcast to do these stories. But the deal blew up. We were supposed to do a stock deal, we were supposed to do a stocks deal and sell them the entire entity. Instead, they bought I'm not getting the right term in my mind, but they bought the assets. It became an asset purchase. and they left me with the corporate shell. So if there were any remaining liabilities from a corporation, I owned them. But that happened 24 hours before the deal was supposed to be announced, and lawyers cannot redraft a 72-page contract in 12 hours. Doesn't work. So there were lots of fun points. They were worried about my inventory. They were worried about the age of my inventory because things go down in price, and they were worried about inventory accuracy. We had 18,500 SKUs and not the world's brightest computer system. And so to take an inventory, there was about $32 million in inventory. It's a huge undertaking. They came to me 3 weeks before selling the company, said, we want to do an inventory. I said, no, we're not doing an inventory, because the only thing I'm going to do is screw myself, because there's no way I can count it correctly with no notice. So we counted the top 10% in dollars, and we came out really good. And so that was the test audit, so to speak. So many different stories. It goes on forever. But I still believe that if you have the opportunity to sell a company, what you have to look at is how much money can I make over the next 10 years, so to speak. And then if you can capitalize it all today and you're not living through risk. If any entrepreneurs are listening, my guess is that 95% of your assets are in your business, and you do not have a diversified portfolio. You are doing everything that Alliance Bernstein tells you not to do. You do not want to be concentrated. And when you go to sell your business, you realize, oh my God, when I sold my company, the only things not for sale was my wife, my kids, my house, and my dogs. I own the building. They're going to rent or buy the building. My cars were leased by the company. You got nothing. And you go, and when you scratch your head, you go, holy cow, So if you can take the money, and then you always have to figure out, really the hardest thing is, can I live on this money? And everybody has a different lifestyle. So my lifestyle will be different than the person next to me. So some people will be very happy living on 1/10 of the money that I got, but I need this for my lifestyle. So you have to figure out, if I don't have an income, can I make enough money by investments and what have you, because the machine goes away. The printing press leaves, you sell the printing press.
So sort of final question here, which I think can help a lot of the entrepreneurs who are listening to us today, which is, you mentioned earlier that no one prepares you for 6 months after the sale. What advice do you have for these individuals in terms of thinking about that 6 months after or the year after? What are the things they can think about right now to make sure that the emotional aftermath of the sale is at least mitigated?
In my opinion, you want to take as much or all in cash. Because if you take 100 people that I know that have sold their business, 2 of them actually got along with the company they sold to. Everybody else wound up in some level of dispute or dislike. So an earnout, which will get you more money, because whoever you sell to, if they give you an earnout and incentives, you'll get more money, but they're getting more money too. In my feeling, take the money and run. I'm sorry, go again with the rest of the question. I'm
Sure.
So I get my thought.
No, that's okay. So the question was, you mentioned earlier that no one prepares you for what it's like 6 months after the sale. When you think about advising the entrepreneurs who are listening to us today, what are the things they can do to gird themselves to make sure that the emotional and psychological aftermath of the sale is as mitigated as possible with life after the sale?
I traveled a lot. I saw the world. At one point, I had all 7 continents in my stamped in my passport. You have to remove yourself from the day to day. It's very difficult to go out to dinner with all your ex-executives every weekend because you hear of all the problems. And so the best thing you can do and the hardest thing to do is to distance yourself a little bit, and then time heals. But and then you have to figure out, what am I going to do? Try not to sign such a long non-compete. I signed a 5-year non-compete. In hindsight, that could have been a 3-year non-compete, because they don't want you to go back in business against them. So they're going to try and keep you out of the business as long as possible, but they're really more interested in buying the business. But you need to have things to do. What you'll find out is that you really have a lot to do. Probably the greatest byproduct was that I got time with my kids. When I was selling the company, I put my office and warehouse very close to my house so that I could go home, see my kids. I would work when I went home. And when I was selling the company, my daughter had a school play or had something going on, and I would show up at school. I'd watch her do it. I'd wave to her, and because I had to get back to a meeting, I'm in the middle of selling the company or something else is going on. I got very close to my daughter because we had time together. Used to take her to the bus stop and sometimes say, "You want to have breakfast today, Daddy?" And I'm like, "Wow, I had time." So there's a lot of good things to do, and entrepreneurship's a great thing. Once you've been through it, businesses are really similar. It's very hard to do nothing. I don't do well doing nothing. And then really one piece of advice: travel when you're young. I sold my business. I was 47, and at 58, I had a massive heart attack. And the good news was I had traveled the world. The bad news was it left me with some disabilities. And you get an opportunity, take it, and live good, and don't let these Wall Street guys con you into anything. Oh, did I say that?
Well, look, in all sincerity, thank you for your time today. And also thank you. You really have filled your time. You're quite humble. You filled your time after selling your business with a lot of community service as well. I've seen what you've done with the Boys and Girls Club in Scottsdale and engaging the community and retiring into something versus away from something. Sounds like it's served you very, very well. And so thank you.
If the world has done you well, you owe a little back to the world. And those are the good things that you can do. And even the government still leaves us a couple of tax breaks to do it. So maybe for now.
For now.
and you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to share the story, and it's a great American success story. I don't say it lightly. I'm very proud of it, and I can tell all these fun stories, and I could fill about a couple of 100 hours of podcast with the stories. But at the end of the day, they're all part of the experience, and every person goes through the same stuff in different forms. Employees, fun.
Thank you, David, so much for your time, and thanks everyone for listening today.